He didn't walk in like a boss. He didn't wear a name tag or bring an entourage. He didn't need to. Because this wasn't a press event. It wasn't a scheduled inspection. This was personal. And he came alone. The man who quietly stepped through the front door of a tired-looking steakhouse on a slow Wednesday afternoon in Fort Smith, Arkansas, didn't look like someone about to change everything. He looked like any other customer. Boots scuffed from use, worn denim faded with time, a ball cap pulled low enough to cast a shadow over his eyes, and a brown leather jacket that had clearly seen more miles than most cars in the parking lot. But make no mistake, this wasn't just any man. This was Daniel Whitmore, founder, visionary, and today, an undercover storm wrapped in silence. Outside, the heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt like the whole city was exhaling in exhaustion. Inside, the air was thick, not with energy, but with resignation. A kind of invisible weight hung in the room. The kind you feel when something's wrong, but no one says it out loud. The steakhouse itself was forgettable. Tucked between a check-cashing place and a liquor store, the kind of spot you pass by without remembering it was ever there. Just another restaurant trying to stay alive. But this one mattered, to him. Because once upon a time, this wasn't just any location. It was part of a dream. Whitmore's Chop House. 17 restaurants across 5 states, built from scratch since '96. Daniel had stepped back in recent years, handed the reins to those he trusted. But lately, the trust had been cracking. Bad reviews, staff turnover, financial gaps that didn't add up. Excuses flooded his inbox. He didn't want excuses. He wanted answers. The host barely looked up. "Table for one?" Daniel replied. "Somewhere quiet if it's not too much trouble." The host led him to a booth near the window, table 7. Daniel slid in, back straight, hands resting flat on the table. He picked up the menu and scanned it, not because he needed to, but because he knew how to play the role. A man who belonged, yet no one noticed. He'd mastered that long ago. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to see. His eyes moved across the room, slowly. The staff moved carefully, like walking through broken glass. The manager leaned against the wall with crossed arms, watching, not helping. And then she arrived. Jenna, mid to late 20s, sleeves rolled up, hair in a messy bun, tired but sharp. "Afternoon, sir. I'll be taking care of you today." She looked like someone who had long ago stopped expecting things to get better, but hadn't completely given up. He ordered the ribeye, medium rare. The food came out quickly, surprisingly good, but Daniel wasn't there for flavor. He was watching how it got to the table and what came with it. Because after the coffee refill, after the warm plate of steak and collards, Jenna dropped the check with something folded inside, a slip of paper, tucked like a secret. He waited for her to walk away, then unfolded it. 6 words written in blue ink. "If you're really who I think you are, please don't leave without talking to me." His pulse didn't race. His face didn't change. But everything inside him shifted. She knew. She knew exactly who he was. And now he knew this wasn't just about missing money or sloppy service. This was deeper, older, rooted, and about to unravel. One note, one waitress, and one quiet promise to never look away again. Daniel Whitmore didn't flinch. Not when he unfolded the note. Not when Jenna vanished into the crowd like nothing had happened. And not when he realized he was standing in the middle of something bigger than a bad Yelp rating. His face remained calm, unreadable. Years of experience taught him that. But inside, his mind was already in motion. Fast, calculating, focused. The words on the note weren't desperate. They were deliberate, like someone who had waited a long time to speak and finally found the moment to whisper. She knew exactly who he was and still dared to reach out. That alone told him more than any financial report ever could. This wasn't just poor management or sloppy systems. It was deeper. It was rot. And rot spreads. He glanced toward the kitchen again. Bryce, he'd caught the name earlier, was still there, arms crossed, standing near the pass like a guard dog with a clipboard. Thick build, buzz cut, polo shirt stretched too tight across his chest. He wasn't watching the food. He was watching the people, commanding the space without words. The kind of presence that made others shrink. Daniel slid out of the booth, dropped a few bills on the table, and moved casually toward the front. The host barely acknowledged him. Daniel didn't respond. He turned instead into the hallway marked employees only, restrooms, walking slow, measured, not trying to sneak, just confident enough not to be questioned. But Bryce wasn't stupid. "Sir," came the voice behind him, just sharp enough to pierce the air. "Restrooms are on the other side." Daniel stopped, turned halfway, his voice level. "Looking for the manager." "That'd be me," Bryce said, stepping forward, his tone soaked in customer service sweetness. But there was steel beneath it. Daniel met his stare. "You free to talk?" "About what?" "I'd like a word with my server." Bryce's smile flattened. "You got a complaint. You bring it to me. You don't pull my staff off the floor. That's not how this works." Daniel didn't raise his voice, didn't blink. "Then I guess you'll have to get used to it working different." Something in that tone made Bryce hesitate. He studied Daniel's face a little too long, like trying to place it. But Daniel gave him nothing, just silence, the kind of silence that made people uncomfortable. Bryce scoffed. "She's probably in the back closing up." Without another word, Daniel turned and walked toward the back hallway. He found her near the walk-in, arms wrapped around a crate of lemons. She froze when she saw him. Not surprised, but cautious. Alert. "What are you doing back here?" she whispered. "Got your note," Daniel said softly. "Now talk." She glanced over her shoulder, then nodded once, leading him into the storage closet at the end of the hall. The room was barely bigger than a pantry, filled with cleaning supplies, oil jugs, and the stale smell of fryer grease. She closed the door behind them and took a breath. Then another. "I wasn't sure if you'd read it," she said, "or if you'd even still be here." "You said something wasn't right," Daniel prompted. Jenna rubbed her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Not the kind of tired you fix with a day off, but the kind that lives in your bones. "Bryce isn't just rude," she began. "He's dangerous. Food orders disappear. Liquor bottles vanish. Cash registers come up short, but only when he's on closing shift." Daniel's brow furrowed. "And no one said anything?" "They're scared," she said simply. "We all are. He cuts hours off the schedule, then clocks people out early in the system. It doesn't show up in payroll. You try to say something, suddenly your shifts disappear, or you get written up for something that never happened." Daniel absorbed it, steady. No expression, just listening. One bartender caught him pocketing cash. She was gone by that weekend. No explanation. "Why, tell me," he asked finally. "I used to work at your Bentonville location," she said. 6 years ago. You probably don't remember, but during opening week, a guy was choking. I noticed before anyone else did. You tipped me $100 just for checking on him. Said I had initiative." Daniel blinked slowly. "I remember that." She looked down. "I saw your face today. I didn't think you'd come back. Not like this. I needed to see it for myself," he said. "Well," Jenna exhaled, "you're seeing it." Daniel studied her. There was no drama in her tone, no panic, just someone who'd been holding the truth too long, the way people do when no one's listening. He understood that feeling, all too well. "All right," he said at last. "I'm coming back tomorrow, but I won't be coming back as a stranger." She glanced at the door, voice low. "Then you should leave through the side. Bryce has cameras out front." Daniel nodded, slipping the folded note back into his pocket like a secret weapon. "You gonna be okay?" "I've made it this far." He didn't smile, but he nodded. That was enough. He didn't go home. He checked into a cheap motel 10 minutes away, one of those places with flickering lights and vending machines that barely worked, the front desk behind scratched plexiglass. No questions, just a room key, the kind of place made for quiet planning. The note still sat in his jacket, pressing against his chest like a mission. At 10:17 p.m., his phone buzzed. No name, just a number and a message. "Side lot, dumpster, 11 p.m., come alone." Daniel didn't hesitate. By 10:58, he was already leaning against the brick wall behind the steakhouse. A weak floodlight flickered overhead. Trash cans lined the alley. The air smelled like oil and old takeout. He kept his hands in his pockets, eyes scanning shadows. At 11:03, the back door opened. Jenna emerged, hoodie pulled over her head. Her steps were fast but quiet. She glanced behind her like she was being followed. "Thanks for showing up," she whispered. "I said I would," Daniel replied. "Anyone see you?" "No." She pulled something from her pocket, a small silver key wrapped in a napkin. "This opens Bryce's locker," she said. "Back room. There's a black duffel bag inside. He keeps a second phone in there. Burner. I've seen him use it when he thinks no one's watching." Daniel raised an eyebrow. You've been watching him? Someone had to. You know this puts your job at risk. Jenna shook her head. My job was at risk the moment I started asking questions, but I can't keep watching him cut hours, steal money, and fire people who won't suck up to him. Daniel's eyes softened. You're brave. No, she whispered. I'm tired. And Daniel understood. That kind of tired wasn't physical. It was generational. It came from being overlooked, stepped over, and still showing up. It was a tired he knew all too well. I'll go in tomorrow, he said quietly. I'll look around. If what you're saying holds up, I'll take care of it. Jenna hesitated. Bryce doesn't work alone. Glenn, the regional guy, he's in on it too. They talk like they've got secrets. Daniel's jaw tightened. Glenn, a name that used to mean trust. Thanks for telling me, Daniel said. I'm just giving you the full picture, she replied. As he turned to walk away, he paused. If anyone gives you pushback for talking to me, tell them who I am. And who's that? The man who built this place. She watched him disappear into the dark. No cape, no camera crew, just a man carrying a note, a key, and the weight of a broken system he was about to confront. And somewhere inside he knew. The whisper in the fryer room was just the beginning. The next morning, Daniel Whitmore didn't change a thing. Same scuffed boots, same brown leather jacket, same hat pulled low enough to erase identity, but just high enough to command a second glance. He wasn't there to put on a show. He was there for evidence. He stepped through the same front door just before lunch rush, not because he wanted food, but because he needed to see how the machine moved in the light of day, and because sometimes truth looks different when the room is full and the pressure's real. The host barely looked up. You again? He muttered, tapping at his cracked iPad. Daniel gave a small nod. One of those weeks. The kid waved him toward the same booth without another word. Table 7. Same view of the kitchen door, same corner seat. But today, Daniel's appetite wasn't for steak, it was for truth. The restaurant was louder now. Staff moved faster. Orders were shouted, dishes clattered. On the surface, things looked better. But Daniel could feel it, tension vibrating beneath every step. Bryce stepped out from the back, pretending to check something on his clipboard, but his eyes were locked on Daniel. Tight smile, watchful, suspicious. He was too calm to be comfortable. Daniel didn't flinch. He sat, scanned the room casually, ordered a coffee, and waited for the rhythm to settle. The second Bryce turned his back, Daniel slipped out the side. Just like Jenna promised, the mop bucket propped the door open again. He slipped inside, hallway empty, silence pressing against the walls. He moved fast, locker room first. Bryce's locker was easy to find, tall, dented, a worn BL sticker on the front. Daniel pulled out the small silver key Jenna had given him and slid it into the lock. Click. Inside, gym clothes, a bottle of drugstore cologne, and wedged into the side pocket of a black duffel bag, a burner phone. No case, no password. Daniel's fingers moved quickly, scrolling through contacts saved under vague initials, GTHQLMWD. He didn't recognize the names, but he knew the pattern. This was a shadow network. He snapped pictures of every screen, every message, proof. Then, in the corner of the bag, something heavier. Rolled up bills, bound by tight rubber bands, small denominations. No labels, off-the-books cash. More proof. Daniel zipped the bag shut and moved to the manager's office next door. Door unlocked. He stepped inside. The air smelled like stress, old takeout and dust. The desk drawers groaned as he searched until he found it, a small black leather ledger, handwritten, pages stained with fingerprints and time. The cover said Langley's Daily Book. He opened it, and there it was, inventory entries with disappearing numbers, alcohol stock never matching invoices, staff tips rounded down to the dollar, hours erased and rewritten in shaky pen. Notes in the margins with symbols Daniel didn't recognize. Codes, maybe. Cover-ups, certainly. His fingers moved automatically, snapping photos, flipping pages. Then the door creaked open. Bryce, he didn't speak right away, just stood there, arms crossed, smile gone. You think you're slick, he said coldly. Daniel didn't move. I should have known when you walked in here, Bryce continued, stepping inside. You didn't look scared enough to be just some customer. Daniel met his eyes. You talk a lot for someone with dirty hands. Bryce's nostrils flared. You break into my locker, my office. You think you're walking out of here like it's nothing? Daniel stayed calm, still holding the ledger. I'm not walking out as a customer, Bryce. He took one step forward, his voice low, even, final. I'm the man whose name is on the lease, the man who built this place, the man you've been stealing from. Bryce's expression faltered just for a second. Then he recovered, almost. Daniel pressed forward. You've been threatening people, shaving wages, pocketing cash, faking inventories like it's your first con job. But here's the thing, paper never lies. Bryce's fists clenched, but he didn't move. You call security? Daniel challenged. The police? Go ahead. Ahead, let's all compare notes. Bryce paused, then laughed, bitter and hollow. You think this ends with me? He said. You think I pulled all this off alone? Daniel squinted. Glenn, Bryce nodded once. You don't want to know how deep it goes. Daniel did. He already did. He walked past Bryce without a word, ledger tucked into his jacket like a sword. No fear, no rush. Because now he had more than just hunches. He had receipts. Back at the motel, Daniel sat at the small desk beneath a flickering light bulb. The burner phone sat on one side. The photos of the ledger, pages of silent crimes, on the other. He didn't need a spreadsheet. This was the truth, and truth didn't need formatting. At 9:04 p.m., his phone rang, unknown number, local area code. He answered without saying a word. Dan, it's Glenn Tate. Daniel let the silence stretch. I heard you've been poking around Fort Smith, Glenn continued, voice too calm. Didn't think we'd need to talk like this, but here we are. You should have called sooner, Daniel said flatly. I didn't know it was that bad. Daniel chuckled once, sharp, bitter. No, you just didn't want to know. There was a pause on the line. Bryce was never polished, Glenn said finally, but we needed numbers to stabilize. He was getting it done. You mean he was stealing? I didn't know about that part. Daniel's voice dropped razor thin. Don't lie to me, Glenn. Not now. Another long silence. You don't hire someone like Bryce without knowing what he's willing to do, Daniel continued. You brought him in to do your dirty work so you could keep your hands clean. Glenn tried to pivot. Dan, come on. We go way back. You know how tough this market's been. Labor shortages, shrinking margins. Save it. You stepped back. The pressure was on me. I had to make calls. Calls that got people robbed, humiliated, fired for telling the truth. You're making this personal. Daniel leaned forward in his chair, eyes burning. It is personal. He was quiet for a beat, then spoke again, slower. I built this company for people like me, people who got passed over, people who needed a shot. And now, I've got waitresses scared to ask for breaks. I've got line cooks pretending they didn't see what they saw. And I've got managers building empires out of fear. Glenn's tone hardened. Look, I don't want this to get ugly. I'm trying to keep us clean here. Daniel almost laughed. Clean? You've got burner phones, cash stashes, fake logs, threats. That's not clean. That's just quiet. Glenn hesitated, then asked, what do you want? Daniel didn't hesitate. I want you gone. You can't make that call. I'm still the founder. My name's still on every legal document. You think the board won't listen once they see the paper trail? If you go public with this, Glenn started, voice rising. We all lose, Daniel finished for him. Yeah, maybe. But here's the difference. I'm ready to start over. Are you? He ended the call without saying goodbye. He didn't need to, because now everything was out in the open. The corruption, the fear, the betrayal. And with every photo, every note, every whisper documented on paper, Daniel had what no one could deny. The truth, and the paper never lies. The truth doesn't move like thunder. It begins quietly, like water pressing against a dam. And once it breaks, it never flows backward. 2 days after Daniel's confrontation with Glenn, he and Jenna sat in a booth at a quiet diner across town. Nothing fancy, just black coffee and vinyl seats that squeaked when you leaned back. Across from them sat Ken Holland, not a media giant, just a man with a weathered laptop, ink-stained fingers, and a reputation for writing what mattered, not what corporate liked. Ken flipped open his notebook and clicked his pen. Let's start at the beginning. Jenna took a breath. She looked at Daniel once, not for permission, but for grounding. Then she spoke. She talked about the threats, Bryce's silent stares that followed you like a shadow, the hours shaved off the books, the checks that never matched the time you gave. She talked about the liquor that vanished, the food deliveries that never showed, the rules that changed depending on who you were. She spoke about the fear, not loud, just there, constant, like the hum of a broken freezer. Ken barely looked up as he scribbled. So what made you speak up? Jenna hesitated, then answered simply, because he walked in. She gestured toward Daniel, who sat silent, steady, Ken looked over his glasses. You were undercover? Daniel gave the slightest shake of his head. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Ken smiled. Corporate might say that's the same thing. Daniel leaned in. Let them, because here's the thing. They weren't watching at all. 2 hours later, Ken had a story. By the end of the weekend, the headline was everywhere. Undercover owner uncovers abuse at local steakhouse. Whistleblower waitress brings down corrupt manager. Legacy restored by truth, one booth at a time. The fallout hit like a second sunrise. Emails poured in. Some from customers, shocked, supportive, or heartbroken to learn what had happened in a place they thought they knew. Others came from former staff, some apologizing for not speaking up, others offering their own stories, ghost shifts, missing tips, rewritten logs, managers with similar patterns across other branches. Different states, same silence. Daniel read every single one, because this wasn't just about one restaurant anymore. This was the rot creeping beneath the whole system. But amidst the flood of betrayal came something else, recognition. Jenna arrived early the following Monday. She found an envelope on the desk with her name on it. Inside, a full-time offer, salary, benefits, a single-line title at the top, General Manager, Fort Smith location. She blinked, read it again, then again. Daniel was already in the doorway. You serious? She asked, her voice smaller than usual. He nodded once. You earned it. I don't know if I can. You already have. She held the letter like it might disappear. No one's ever backed me like this. Daniel offered a faint smile. You backed yourself. I just made sure it stuck. That Friday morning, Jenna led her first full staff meeting. No speeches, no theatrics. Just a circle of tired faces, coffee cups in hand, and one guiding question. What's working? What's not? People spoke. Honestly, no fear, no tension. Daniel watched from the back. But victory never arrives without a price. 2 days later, a thick manila envelope landed at Daniel's motel door. The words urgent legal enclosure stamped across the front like a threat disguised as protocol. Inside, a cease and desist order, claims of slander, trespassing, interference with operations, signed Glenn Tate. Daniel didn't even raise an eyebrow. He picked up the phone and dialed. Alicia answered on the first ring. He's trying to scare me, Daniel said. Then that means you're close, Alicia replied. Let him try. He's not ready for what comes next. So they prepared. Not for war, for truth. But not in a boardroom, not in some legal office with polished wood and silent clocks. Daniel insisted they meet where it all began. Table 7, Fort Smith. The steakhouse still smelled like lemon cleaner and fry grease, but it also smelled like change. On Sunday afternoon, the restaurant stayed closed for cleaning, but Daniel made sure every worker still got paid. They'd earned rest without penalty. When the CEO arrived, he looked like a man walking into someone else's house. Tall, trim, mid-50s, polished but stiff. His handshake was firm, but Daniel's was firmer. Mr. Whitmore, the CEO said, you've had quite a week. Daniel tilted his head. No, we've had quite a decade. I'm just the one cleaning it up. The CEO sat. We read the article, the documents. Glenn's been terminated. Legal's launching a full audit. Policy rewrites have already started. Daniel didn't smile. Good. We'd like to bring you back formally, the CEO continued. Not full-time, of course, but oversight. A seat at the table. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice steady. Then here are my terms. The CEO blinked. I want back pay for every worker who had hours stolen. I want anonymous reporting systems in every location. I want benefits for hourly workers, starting here. And I want the new policies printed and posted in every kitchen by next month. The CEO hesitated. That's a tall list. Daniel's stare didn't break. I've spent my life being told what's too tall. I'm not interested in limits anymore. Another pause. Then you'll have it. They shook again. This time, it meant something. Later that evening, Daniel walked in the kitchen. Jenna was wiping down the prep counter. The place smelled like fresh rolls and bleach. He handed her an envelope. Inside, a $2,000 bonus and a note. 5 words handwritten. For the day you spoke up. Jenna looked up, blinking back the weight. I don't know what to say. You already said the hard part, Daniel replied. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant began to change. Not with paint or new menus, but with rhythm. Staff laughed more. People stayed longer. The food got better, because everything tastes different when it's made by someone who isn't scared. Jenna became a pillar, firm, fair, human. New hires were trained with care. Old staff returned with cautious hope, and the word spread. Fort Smith wasn't just recovering, it was leading. But the story wasn't over, because Daniel knew that systems don't rot in one place, and where there was silence before, there were likely more voices waiting to be heard. This truth came with a price, but it also bought something priceless, belief. And now Daniel was ready to spend it. Daniel didn't do it for the applause. He didn't need a round of congratulations or a plaque with his name on it. What he needed, what he'd always needed, was peace. The kind that only shows up when dignity is restored, when people finally feel seen. So when he handed Jenna the envelope with the $2,000 bonus tucked neatly beside a small handwritten note, he didn't make a speech. The note simply said, "For the day you spoke up." Jenna stared at the words, her fingers trembling just slightly, not from weakness, but from everything they represented. A paycheck was expected, but that note, that meant someone had heard her, believed her, backed her. She didn't say much, just nodded, and that was enough. From that moment on, the rhythm of the restaurant shifted. It didn't become perfect overnight. There were still late orders, wrong tickets, and the occasional fryer mishap. But something deeper had changed. The heartbeat had returned. Staff didn't whisper anymore. They shared ideas. They asked for help. They joked on the line and clapped when a new hire made it through their first shift without panicking. Jenna led with strength, but never with fear. Her power came not from her title, but from the trust she earned every single day. And it showed. Customers started to notice. The food tasted better, not because the recipes changed, but because the people making them had pride again. They weren't rushing through orders while watching their backs. They were focused, present, and that changes everything. One customer told Daniel the mashed potatoes reminded him of his grandmother's. Another said it just felt different, warmer, lighter, real. One afternoon, Daniel sat alone in the small back office, reviewing invoices when a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Theo, the teenage dishwasher, peeked in. "Mr. Whitmore?" Daniel looked up. "Yeah?" Theo stepped in, a little hesitant. "My mom, she used to work at your Tulsa spot. Said you helped her when my brother got sick. Gave her time off. Paid her anyway." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What's your last name?" "Ramsey." Daniel's expression shifted. Surprise, then recognition. "Tell her I remember, and tell her kid's doing good work." Theo smiled so wide it nearly split his face in half. "I will." And just like that, the circle quietly closed. One life Daniel had touched long ago had found its way back into his kitchen. Later that night, after the final shift ended and the mop water was dumped, Daniel sat in booth 7, same booth where it all started. No steak this time. Just a simple plate of hot grits, 2 pieces of toast, butter melting in the middle. He ate slowly, alone. Not with sadness, but with reflection. He thought of Jenna, of Theo, of the single moms who worked double shifts without childcare, of cooks who iced their wrists between shifts because taking a day off wasn't an option, of workers who kept their heads down and mouths shut because speaking up had always meant losing everything. And now, maybe not. This was never about branding, or profits, or Yelp reviews. It was about people. It was about truth. And more than anything, it was about dignity. Because at the end of the day, Daniel knew something most corporations forget. Change doesn't start with a title. It starts with courage. Fade to black. And this was just the beginning. Stay tuned for part 2. More stores, more secrets, more truth. Subscribe, share, and remember, sometimes the revolution starts with nothing more than a plate of grits and the courage to speak up.